If it's one thing I absolutely believe Jamaicans need to not bring into 2025, it would be hustle culture. And I know when we speak about hustle culture, immediately we attach it to some positive connotation. We say, well, they're working hard, they're making their ends meet. And while that may be the intention for some, I want to guide you into the understanding of how hustle culture actually can have negative implications. And I want to show you how it's negatively impacting the Jamaican society. So stay tuned for that discussion. My name is Brianna Vernon, and this is the Independent Report. In the last episode, I mentioned that the Independent Report is now in a video format. Initially, it was an audio only podcast, but I saw the need to include a video. As you know, the way of the world now, video podcasts are the way to go. So here we are. Now back to the topic at hand, the implications of hustle culture and its impacts on the Jamaican society. So let's talk about the basic definition of what hustling is, or to hustle. So hustle or to hustle is to move yourself fast or to get someone else to move fast. When we think about, hustling and bustling through the town, or he hustled me out of $1,000, basically it's a fast move, right? And the first group of people that I think of when I contemplate on hustle culture in Jamaica, it would be, can you guess? The windshield wipers, who lay wait you at the stoplights on the highways especially, so that they can pour soap and water on your windshield and wipe it for you and clean it with the expectation that you're going to pay them for their humble services, right? And many times if you don't pay them, they get verbally aggressive, or they even leave the soap and water, they leave the lather right on your windshield for you to take care of it yourself, as if you had just purposely placed yourself in the situation by driving and being stopped by the stoplight on a highway. Because that's what many of the windshield wipers do. They particularly target the highways and closer to the stoplights because they know that they will get a large number of vehicles coming through, and you'll have to stop so that they can get to conduct their business that you did not ask them to conduct, and that they can get to, receive payment. The payment that you did not promise you would provide for this many times unwanted service. Doesn't that sound like hustle culture to you? Doesn't that sound like hustling you out of your money? Well, most people would say, or well, not most, but I've heard people say that, well, at least they're not stealing. I mean, well, I guess in the specific definition of stealing, they're not stealing, but I mean, if you ask most people who give them $50 or $100 or more, I would say those people didn't necessarily want to pay for a service they didn't ask for. What do you think? I mean, I think that's the case for most people who encounter these windshield wipers on the streets, right? A lot of people, they just want to avoid the possible negative altercation that could ensue from them not giving the windshield wipers their money for the service that they did not ask for, right? And so that's just one major example of hustle culture playing out in Jamaica, because the thing we have to understand about hustle culture is this: it leads to three main situations. One, lack of discipline. Two, entitlement. Three, people who cannot be satisfied. Cannot satisfy. Nothing is ever enough. And so for a windshield wiper to expect to be paid for a service that no one necessarily asked for, and mind you, there are those who they don't force you. If you tell them, don't touch my windshield, no thank you, they will say, oh, no problem, and they move on to the next person. But most of what I've seen, the interactions have not been so peaceful. And even if they all were, do you really think that standing at the stoplights to wipe people's glass is a legitimate job? And if you say yes, I would say that's one of the issues that is rampant in Jamaica, is the anything goes, yes, vibe that many people take on or believe in. Anything goes. Well, they need money, so let them stand at the stoplight and expect to be paid for wiping your glass. Let them create their own job, even if it can be a hindrance to other people, but at least they're not stealing, right? Okay, but they're not the only ones in the Jamaican society who contribute to hustle culture. And I want to make this disclaimer from now, I'm not bashing this group at all. We absolutely need them. There are taxi operators. It's without a doubt that most people wouldn't be able to get to school, to work, home, or anywhere else for that matter without taxi operators. And there's no discussion to be had about their importance. It goes without saying. But that doesn't mean they don't have their part to play in hustle culture. When we think about when you're driving downtown, going about your business, and when you look, whoops, right past you, there goes a taxi operator, or taxi man as we call them. And this is not to say they're all like this, but let's be real. Most times when somebody bad drive upon the road, you check it out, it's a taxi man, right? You see them meander their way through the traffic. You see them cut in front of you, overtake you, all manner of evil, right? They're going about their business. They'll argue, well, I have to drop off this load, pick up the next load, make my money, because competition is stiff. You have a lot of other taxi drivers, so you have to go out there and make your bread. But when making your bread can contribute to indiscipline and chaos in society, it is also contributing to the negative impacts of hustle culture. Another way taxi drivers contribute to this issue that we're facing in Jamaica is, say for example, you have a 7-seater and the driver has all the seats filled, right? But yet he finds space for an 8th passenger. Where does he find the space for that 8th passenger? Can you tell me? Right between the passenger at the front of the vehicle and himself. That's where the 8th passenger goes. And this absolutely blows my mind as to how people wouldn't be able to understand that this is hustle culture at its peak. Because think about it. Unless I am out of the loop, that 8th passenger seated on that makeshift seat, right in the middle there, that little stool that looks like it hurts to sit on, that's not even a full seat. Not even comfortable. But yet, that 8th passenger is paying the same fare. If the fare is $150, that's the same fare the 8th passenger pays. Is that not hustle culture in all its glory? Is that not hustle culture manifest right before our eyes? Because remember, we highlighted hustle culture causes, people to not be able to be satisfied. And so the taxi driver, unable to be satisfied, decides that he has to fill every crevice in the vehicle. And it's not even funny because it's illegal and it's not safe. But not only is it illegal and not safe, it's also a big hustle move. Because you are receiving less value for the same price that you're paying as a passenger. Because the taxi driver cannot satisfy. The vehicle is created to bring 7 people. But the taxi driver, some of them find the space for 1 more. Hustle culture. And finally, I'll touch on this final group who definitely contributes to hustle culture as well, are vendors. And yes, we know they have their children to send to school to feed. They are making their ends meet as well. But we cannot deny that when we see, for example, vendors having their goods and their clothing lined off, for instance, on the walls of a bank, of a financial institution, it just looks incredibly tacky. I remember Burger King before it moved, when it was further down on St. James Street in Montego Bay, Jamaica. I remember how the vendors took reign of the front of the establishment with their clothing and whatever else they were selling, and how just disorganized and chaotic it all looked on the outside. And not to mention when they lay out their goods on the sidewalks, basically forcing pedestrians to walk in the roads or to play hopscotch. And so what you find happening is that when a society has so many of these depictions, and when a society is portrayed in this light, because you walk downtown and you see these things, you see the taxi drivers dashing through the streets, you see the vendors with their goods laid out on the sidewalks, you can't walk, you see the windshield wipers non-verbally antagonizing the drivers just by presenting themselves with their soap and water to wipe the windshield that the driver did not ask them to wipe. When you see these portrayals and depictions in a society in such a prevalent way, it gives off an impression that this is a nation that is all over the place, that anything goes, that it's not quite orderly or quite as orderly as it needs to be. It also gives an impression that this is a society that is not advancing as quickly as it needs to be. In so many other ways, Jamaica is advancing, but yet at its core and in the mindset of the people, it's not advancing. And so I believe I've, as clearly as I possibly could, outlined how hustle culture is running rampant in Jamaica, and how it's actually not a good thing. Because hustle culture at its root lacks foundation, and in order for a people and a society and a nation to thrive, it needs stability, and that's just something that hustle culture doesn't provide. I'm not saying that sometimes people don't have to hustle. Do something else, do something else to make it work, right? There's no problem with that. But when it becomes a lifestyle, that's when you say, there's a lack of growth. And that's what we don't want. Those are my 2 cents, or my many cents, on hustle culture and its implications on the Jamaican society. What say you? If you agree or disagree, comment below. And don't just say, foolish shit talk. Tell me why. And don't just say, yes, you're right. Tell me why you think that as well. And also follow Noble Media Network, which is the platform on which the Independent Report airs, on Instagram at Noble Media Net. There you can find out more about what the network has to offer. Also, the Independent Report airs bi-weekly on Thursdays at 7 p.m. So share, like, comment, subscribe. Tell your friends that, look, you gotta listen to this podcast because it has some very interesting topics that you'll want to hear about. So that's it for this topic. My name is Brianna Vernon, and this was the Independent Report.